You're traveling through another dimension. A dimension not only of sight and sound, but of mind. It is the middle ground between light and shadow, between science and superstition. And it lies between the pit of one's fears and the summit of one's knowledge. You are now traveling through a dimension of imagination. You just crossed over into the Twilight Zone.
Hello and welcome to a bonus episode of Anthology, presented by ObsessiveViewer.com. I'm your host, Matt Hurt, and if this is your first time listening, Anthology is one man's examination of the Twilight Zone as a first-time viewer. Each podcast, I share my first impressions, analysis, and overall thoughts on Rod Serling's iconic series one episode at a time. However, in this bonus episode review series, I'm reviewing the 2019 Twilight Zone reboot from Monkey Paw Productions, hosted by Jordan Peele on CBS All-Access. You can find more of Anthology, as well as a full episode archive at anthologypod.com. And if you want to contact me, you can use the Facebook page at facebook.com/anthologypod, tweet me at OVAnthologypod, or send an email to matt@obsessiveviewer.com. And you can also check out my other podcasts, The Obsessive Viewer, over at obsessiveviewer.com, and Tower Junkies, a Stephen King Dark Tower podcast at towerjunkiespod.com. Today on the show, I'll be discussing 6 Degrees of Freedom. It's the 6th episode of the Twilight Zone's first season, and it premiered on May 2nd, 2019 on CBS All-Access. Before I get to my thoughts on 6 Degrees of Freedom, however, I do have some news and some housekeeping and some other stuff to go through. Notes from previous episodes and everything. So if you'll bear with me, I'm going to go ahead and go into that. First of all, I'm recording in a different space than I usually do, so just heads up if the sound quality is different. I'm recording in my bedroom/office, instead of my living room, just because it's a little bit more comfortable. So hopefully, I know, kind of the acoustics in this room are not that ideal, but, hopefully it's not that bad. I'll evaluate how it sounds when I edit it and decide from there if I'll keep doing this. But anyway, yeah, so if there's any difference in sound quality, sorry, or you're welcome, whichever side of the spectrum it lands on. If it sounds better, then you're welcome. If it sounds terrible, then I'm so sorry. But yeah, so, hopefully, it's good. So anyway, there are a couple things I want to bring up right up top. I got some cool feedback and everything, that I wanted to share, cause I love hearing from, the listeners. So, first up, I got a very nice email from a listener who emailed me a couple years ago, actually. If you want to hear that original email, I believe that was read back in episode 38, my review of The Howling Man. So check that out there. But anyway, I think I did at least. I'm not sure where it was. But anyway, the emailer in question, wrote me a new email. When they had emailed me a couple years ago, they asked to remain anonymous. That's why I'm being kind of coy with it. So I don't know if they wanted me to keep them anonymous for this one or not. But anyway, this listener writes, "Hi Matt, just a thanks for your review of Wonderkind. I felt pretty much the same as you. Your reviews are always so relatable to me, and I basically listen to hear my own opinions expressed, usually with more humor and depth than I could manage. This is my second email to you. It was neat hearing you read the first one on the podcast. I think it was a couple years ago. Anyway, please continue. At your own pace is fine." Smiley face. So thank you so much for emailing in and, and finding my reviews humorous because so many people, I don't know. I like my sense of humor. A lot of people find it kind of groan-inducing. So, and this episode is going to be no different because I do have what I would call a zinger lined up for one of the points that I'm going to make here. So stay tuned for that. So anyway, thank you so much for emailing in. And of course everyone can email me at matt@obsessiveviewer.com. And also just, thank you for listening for so long. It's been 2 years since this particular listener sent me an email. And obviously in those 2 years, I've gone through hiatusi, and, kind of, it's been inconsistent to say the least in the last 2 years. So just the fact that anyone's still listening after going through those prolonged hiatuses, just means a lot to me because I really appreciate your guys' loyalty and everything, even when I sometimes may think that I don't necessarily deserve it. So anyway, thank you so much for writing in. Of course, once again, you can email me at matt@obsessiveviewer.com. Any feedback or thoughts or anything, feel free to send an email, and I will read every single email you send. And then the other piece of housekeeping I want to bring up is good friend of the show, Robert, who's been a supporter for a long time across all of the podcasts. He went on a bit of a review tear across all of the Obsessive Viewer podcasts on iTunes, and I wanted to read his email or read his iTunes review of Anthology here. So he gave us 5 stars, which is obviously super appreciated, and the subject line is awesome podcast. So that's very nice. So Robert writes, I love Black Mirror, and a couple years ago I searched for Black Mirror podcasts. This one caught my eye, and I haven't looked back. I'll always be grateful for this podcast because that's how I came in contact with the podcaster Matt Hurt. He's a great guy with movie and TV tastes similar to mine. I love the interactions with Matt, and even though I don't watch every episode of The Twilight Zone, I still enjoy listening to Matt's reviews on them. Really enjoying watching the reboot of The Twilight Zone and Matt's take on them. His reviews on Black Mirror are top-notch, and I love hearing bonus reviews, especially the ones I get to pick. So, of course, Robert, thank you so much for that very kind iTunes review. It seriously means a lot, and I really, really can't say how much I appreciate it. And also just, in particular, I'm very curious what Robert thinks of this episode of The Twilight Zone, 6 Degrees of Freedom, because I know that he is a fan of the movie Sunshine, because I believe he had me review it in a bonus review some time ago, and I mean, Sunshine's one of my favorite movies ever. In this episode of The Twilight Zone, kind of, I don't want to say borrows a lot, but it definitely owes a bit of gratitude toward Sunshine, because there's a lot of things that are similar to Sunshine. So I'm very curious what Robert in particular thinks of this episode of The Twilight Zone, and you, everyone else listening. So let me know what you think. Of course, matt@obsessiveviewer.com. So a couple of pieces of news I want to kind of go through. News and opinion, I guess. So the first one is that Black Mirror Season 5 is coming, of course. I mentioned before that the new season is going to be 3 episodes. They're going to release on Netflix on June 5th. Can't wait. Super excited. I did want to highlight that the Netflix YouTube page, released trailers for all 3 of the episodes. So like individual YouTube trailers for each episode of the new season. I haven't watched them just because I like to go into the show blind, but I did put links to each individual, trailer in the show notes of this episode. So there's going to be, in no particular order, the episodes are going to be Smithereens, Striking Vipers, and Rachel and Jack and Ashley 2. So that's going to be, God, that's in like a week and a half. I'm so excited. I can't wait. So we'll see how Black Mirror does. As soon as I finish this review series on The Twilight Zone, I'm going to go right into Black Mirror Season 5. So look ahead to that. And then the other kind of piece of news or note that I have is that I came across this article on Hypable.com, which Hypable is actually a really good website. I have friends who actually write for Hypable that I met through conventions here in Indianapolis, and it's a great group of people, and they kind of really celebrate fandom and everything, and it's a really cool website. However, this particular article kind of caught my ire a little bit, and I kind of went on a little bit of a Twitter rant about it. So the article posits, like the headline is, CBS All-Access is preventing some fans from experiencing great black-led shows. In that, it kind of goes, I don't know, the premise of this article kind of, got my ire, just because the premise is that, okay, CBS has these great, like, diversely produced and led shows, but by putting them on CBS All Access, they are, like, as it says, preventing some fans from watching it. So, kind of the whole thing is the same thing that kind of has been bothering me about the outcry over CBS All Access as a platform. It seems that there is a vocal corner of the internet that is completely opposed to buying or subscribing to a new streaming site specifically for the shows that they want to see. So, like, CBS All Access now has Star Trek Discovery, The Twilight Zone. They just, in the last couple of days, just showed the teaser trailer for Star Trek Picard, which Patrick Stewart is reprising his role as Jean-Luc Picard for this new series that is going to be exclusively on CBS All Access. And I had a really interesting Twitter conversation also with Curtis. I actually don't know for sure if he listens to Anthology. I know he listens to The Obsessive Viewer. But anyway, he said that it was a whole thing about pirating and everything, and because I was kind of annoyed that people were like, okay, well, I'm not going to watch Star Trek Picard because I don't want to, or I'm going to pirate Star Trek Picard because it's on CBS All Access and I don't want to buy CBS All Access. So, like, my kind of pitch was that, okay, well, people that are complaining about not getting CBS All Access and are going to be quote unquote forced to pirate a show, they're just harming the show. Like, if in some universe Star Trek Picard does not perform well, I would imagine that those same people that pirated the show will kind of bitch and moan about how, oh, Star Trek Picard didn't get renewed or whatever. It's like, okay, well, maybe part of that is because you didn't sign up for the service and get your viewing of the show tracked by CBS so that they know how many people are actually watching it, as opposed to just pirating it and, not supporting it that way. But anyway, I digress. I had a really good conversation with Curtis about that, and he said that, well, on that hand, it doesn't, that argument doesn't really hold up because, like, the music industry and, what was the other example? Anyway, like people pirate music and everything, and that doesn't really affect it, which also, now that I'm thinking about it, like, pirating music does, at least in the early days of piracy and everything, it did have like a profound impact on the music industry. But I digress there. So this article says that that CBS All Access, it's taking the position that by putting these shows on CBS All Access, it's literally preventing fans from experiencing like shows that are celebrating diversity. And I will say that right off the top, CBS All Access is fantastic with their original programming and how it is having such a diverse cast and crew in front of, behind the camera, show running the shows. It's like, it's a very diverse diversity celebrating kind of platform. So, and like, that's great. I am all for that. That is fantastic. I've said for years that, like, I don't have a problem with diversity because I'm not a bigoted asshole, but also I don't have a problem with it because it's like, by definition, they are diverse voices. Like, it is bringing new voices to pop culture and everything that have not been able to have their voice out there because they haven't been, given the same opportunities as, quite frankly, just white people. We've had a lot of stuff over the several decades that have been going out, and that's kind of why a lot of stuff is, I don't know, being recycled. But anyway, once again, I digress. So this article really kind of peeved me off because it's taking the position that, like, okay, by that CBS All Access is, the tone of it almost seemed like they were saying that I don't want to say it was a conspiracy, but like, they're trying to, like, it makes it sound like, okay, well, that's great that they're having these diverse shows and everything, but they're just putting it under the rug on CBS All Access and that no one can see it. It's like, that's not the case. It's not, by putting it on CBS All Access, they are not putting it under the rug or keeping it from the masses and everything. And this is a common kind of, I think, misconception about CBS All Access as a platform. People seem to think that, okay, CBS All Access is a streaming service from CBS, and by putting shows on CBS All Access instead of broadcasting it on CBS, where it is much more accessible from the masses, they are, like, in my Twitter conversation with Curtis, he said that it seems like they don't have the confidence, or they don't have the faith in the shows to put them on network TV. And I just completely disagree with that assertion, because how I feel about it is that CBS All Access is a new streaming platform. It is very young, and it is competing with Netflix, Hulu, Amazon Prime, the smaller channels like Shudder and the Criterion channel, and a bunch of other ones that you can find, like HBO Go to an extent, or I guess it would be HBO now. Oh no, HBO Go. Anyway, so they're competing with so many different streaming platforms. The landscape of television has changed so drastically that network TV is not as lucrative as it once was. It is more, I would argue that it is probably, I don't have the data to back this up, so my opinion is that it seems like it would be more lucrative for networks and whatnot to have a streaming platform where they control the content. They don't have to rely strictly on advertisers to ad support their individual shows. And they can track the numbers of who watches each show. Like, they have the exact numbers, as opposed to on network TV when they have like the Nielsen ratings that are just taking samples and just extrapolating samples from it. So anyway, what it comes down to is that this article saying that CBS All Access is preventing some fans from experiencing great black-led shows. I disagree with that wholeheartedly, because no one is forcing you into a year-long contract with any streaming service. You pay $6 for CBS All Access for a month. If you want to wait until the shows all have their episodes out and ready, you can just pay $6, watch the season, and then cancel your subscription. And it costs $6. That's it. And kind of my counter argument to that is, like, say for sake of argument that, Star Trek and the Twilight Zone were not on CBS All Access. Say that it was on Netflix or Hulu or another streaming service that is not intrinsically tied with a network, one of the big three networks. I don't think people would be complaining about it, because that is just the status quo. Like, okay, everyone has Netflix because Netflix is ubiquitous and has been around and everything. The fact that CBS All Access is new and is an offshoot of one of the big three networks I think that's kind of maybe scaring people or pissing people off, because it is just an extension of network TV. But to bring it back to what I was saying before, that I just remembered I didn't finish up this thought. The kind of hypothetical thought, or the argument that CBS does not have the confidence in their shows to release it on network TV, so that's why they're putting on All Access. I feel that is completely inaccurate, because the way that I see it is that CBS All Access is young. It's, like I said, it's competing with other streaming platforms. It's trying to make a name for itself. So the best way to make a name for itself is to create original series from properties, intellectual properties that have a built-in fan base. I think I've said this all before on the podcast, but anyway, so like putting Star Trek Beyond, or Star Trek Discovery, Star Trek Picard, and The Twilight Zone on CBS All Access, that is guaranteeing that people that are fans of those properties will get CBS All Access. That is a very smart business decision, in my opinion, because that is helping to create more subscribers. And that's stuff that has already reaped, that CBS has already reaped the benefits of, because they've said, even though they're not giving out their, numbers and everything, they said that, okay, well, Star Trek Discovery had gained more subscribers through that, and then the Twilight Zone broke that record, and we have more subscribers than ever before because of the Twilight Zone. So anyway, I've been rambling about this. The link to this article is in the show notes of this episode. Once again, I just think that's kind of, I don't know, it feels just no, I don't know. It feels just wrong for them to say, for someone to posit that, by putting it on CBS All Access, it is keeping people from experiencing great black-led shows. Like, I think that's just completely inaccurate and not really fair, to be honest, because it's a streaming service. It's, like I said, it's not like you need to call your cable provider and be like, hey, I want this channel on my package that I'm paying hundreds of dollars for. It's just a single, like, it's a single serve kind of thing. You subscribe to it, $6, or if you don't want ads, $10. It's worth it. $10 for the month and you get access to original series and everything, and then you can cancel at any time. I don't get the argument that it is putting its content behind. I don't get the argument that putting it behind this paywall is exclusionary to people, to fans and everything, because just don't buy Starbucks one day and you've paid for CBS All-Access. I don't know. It's ridiculous. And frankly, I've devoted too much time to that argument so far anyway in this episode. So this is already getting bloated. I'm so sorry. So notes from previous episodes of The Twilight Zone. So in The Wonderkind, an episode that, again, I didn't really care for that much, I missed a couple of pieces of trivia. One is that the name Oliver Foley, his mother is named Helen Foley, which is, of course, an homage to one of Rod Serling's favorite teachers growing up, who was then given the immortal character name, I guess, was immortal. Her name was immortalized on the original Twilight Zone in the episode Nightmare as a Child. The main character was named Helen Foley. And then I believe that in the movie version, was there a movie version of It's a Good Life? I don't know. One of the movie segments has a character named Helen Foley. And yeah, and also trivia for The Wonderkind as well is that Oliver's sister was played by Jacob Tremblay's younger sister in real life. So that's cool. Those are notes from previous episodes. And let's go into my review of 6 Degrees of Freedom. Plot summary, according to CBS All-Access, is a space crew preparing for the first human flight to Mars is faced with a life-altering decision and its consequences. So, before I get into it, the talent rundown for this episode is 6 Degrees of Freedom stars DeWanda Wise as Flight Commander Alexa Brandt. And that triggered my...
Christian Cornelius Hageman Brandt was a Norwegian military officer and engineer.
As soon as I said that, I realized that I had my Amazon Echo on, so I've muted that.
I'm not quite sure how to help you with that.
And it still went, so okay. Let me test it. Alexa. Good. Okay. My God. So, DeWanda Wise plays Flight Commander Alexa Brandt. She was recently in the television version on Netflix of She's Gotta Have It, Spike Lee's She's Gotta Have It. Co-starring as mission specialist Jerry Pearson is Jefferson White. He's had a bunch of TV roles like in Blind Spot and The Alienist, and he's also credited in Point of Origin. Which is not the next episode of The Twilight Zone, but the episode after that. So, curious how that factors in, or how that will be in that episode. Jonathan Weitzel plays pilot Casey Donlin. He has a recurring role, or had a recurring role, in Riverdale. He was also in Hold the Dark and Bad Times at the El Royale last year. Lucinda Dryzek plays flight surgeon Catherine Langford, otherwise known as Katie in the episode. She has a lot of UK TV credits. I didn't make a note of any of the shows or anything, but she's done very well for herself on television across the pond. And as flight engineer Ray Tanaka is Jessica Williams. I probably know her best from The Daily Show. She was a correspondent for a while, but she's also been in the HBO series Girls. She was in Fantastic Beasts: The Crimes of Grindelwald, and she's also more recently in Olivia Wilde's directorial debut Booksmart, which I believe just came out yesterday or the day before. Or this weekend, I should say. And then rounding out the cast is Joyce Kurtz as the voice of the AI on board the ship named Tina. And this is her only credit anywhere on IMDb. So I found that kind of interesting. Writers for this episode were Heather Ann Campbell. She was a writer on SNL in 2011. And co-writing this episode is Glenn Morgan, who, of course, I mentioned in Nightmare at 30,000 Feet. One of the other episodes, I think. Maybe A Traveler, but yeah, definitely A Traveler. He was a big name in the X-Files universe. So, rounding out the talent rundown, director for this episode was Jacob Verbruggen. He previously directed an episode of Black Mirror, the episode Men Against Fire, and he has also directed episodes of The Alienist. Okay, so with that talent rundown, let me go ahead and go into my initial thoughts on 6 Degrees of Freedom. Overall thoughts upon my first viewing of it is that this was my favorite of the season so far. There's some minor issues here and there, and it's a bit derivative in places of other space movies and shows, but it's like the whole plot of this episode is playing directly into my specific science fiction sensibilities, so I was kind of destined to love this episode. So having said that, I do love the episode, but I do have some critiques here and there. But I'll get to those as I go through my review. And without further ado, let me go into my review of 6 Degrees of Freedom. So right off the bat, I am totally eating my words from my review of Nightmare at 30,000 Feet. In that review episode, I said that the giant Mission to Mars backdrop in the airport, like people were saying that, oh, it's foreshadowing a space episode. And in that review, I said that I don't think that that's the case. I think that that's just really there. And because the words that were on it were, directly from planetary.org, I think, talking about the different missions to Mars that we've had, the rovers and everything. But I'm definitely in my words because that giant-ass Mission to Mars backdrop was definitely foreshadowing this episode. So they must have just pulled the words from that website. So, that's fine. I'm willing to admit when I'm wrong. So anyway, the episode opens with these blurred images of a burning car in a desert, it looks like, the White House. Worth mentioning that there are no penguins on the White House lawn. So that's definitely a plus. There's a shot of marching soldiers or policemen in riot gear. I couldn't really tell. There's also footage of a nuclear bomb detonating. It looks like actual footage of a test detonation, I guess. And then also footage from one of the moon landings, maybe Apollo 11. I couldn't really tell. By the way, there's a great documentary about Apollo 11 that just came out. It's called Apollo 11. Definitely check it out. It's such a cool documentary because it's not talking heads or anything. It's just archival footage, kind of put together to chronologically tell the story of the Apollo 11 mission. And it's just entirely archival footage. There's no talking head, no voiceover or anything. In doing that, it is incredibly immersive and really fascinating. Really great documentary. So check that out. It's Apollo 11. Was just recently released on home video and digital. So check that out. So after those shots, we get a black screen and then the words briefing number 1015060816, with a voiceover saying that. So right off the bat, we have our 1015 reference, that has been happening throughout all of these episodes, except I don't remember there being a reference to 1015 in the Wonderkind. If you guys know of one that I'm missing, in that episode, please let me know because it's kind of driving me just a little bit crazy. Also, I don't think that there was a reference to 1015 in The Comedian, but I should go back and check that out. So anyway, in addition to the 1015, the other numbers 060816, that's a recurrence of sorts of the lottery numbers from Replay. If you remember in the hotel room, the lottery numbers in Replay were 8, 6, 20, and 16. And I still have no idea what the significance of those numbers are. It feel like that. I think the recurrence of them in this episode being 060816 kind of confirms that whatever significance those numbers pose, it is in reference to a date. So August 6, 2016, or if we are to be if it's kind of the British way or the rest of the world's way of telling dates, it would be June 8th, 2016. So either one, like I couldn't find any correlation as to what the significance of that date is, and really it's starting to bug me now that it's come up in another episode. It kind of bothers me that I don't know what it is. So anyway, after the cut to black, we get the introduction of the Bradbury Heavy mission to Mars. We get a weird promotional video introduction. And I think that it's meant to be the aliens evaluating or retelling the story of the Bradbury Heavy mission. In the closed captioning on CBS All-Access, when that voiceover comes back at the end of the episode, I think that the closed caption says that it's identifies the voice as, I think, public affairs officer. So I guess that it's a public affairs officer for the alien race that is kind of overseeing everything. Kind of interesting. I'll get to that at the end of this review. But in the moment, in this opening moment, it seems kind of peculiar, but it does kind of streamline the introduction of the cast, and it really sufficiently dumps all of the exposition we need and establishes the cast, their functions on the crew, and it also establishes that we are in the process of destroying our planet. And I'm going to go ahead and just play that clip here for two reasons. One, because it's going to reorient everyone with the cast and crew and their roles in the episode. Also, I want to highlight the music. Like this episode really swung for the fences, as in regards to the music. Like, I love the score of this episode. So here's a clip from the opening moments of 6 Degrees of Freedom.
The Bradbury Heavy mission. Earth is a planet of many wonders, a rare mix of biological diversity and abundant resources. Humanity has always endeavored to explore and discover in the face of even the longest odds. But the third planet from Sol finds itself on the brink of catastrophe. Environmental changes and political unrest has left Earth's long-term prospects in a tenuous situation. As a result, new horizons have grown increasingly appealing. All systems are a-go for the first human flight to the planet Mars and the start of colonization of the solar system. A large porthole is positioned over the center flight commander seat. For launch and until Mars landing, it is sealed and covered to decrease radiation exposure. The final air-to-ground communication checks are conducted by Flight Commander Alexa Brandt.
MLC, Bradbury confirms porthole radiation shield closure nominal and secured for launch.
And pilot Casey Donlin.
Tina confirms all near-Earth network tracking frequencies are locked.
Flight engineer Ray Tanaka monitors onboard fuel cells, preparing to transfer to ship's internal power.
LCC, Bradbury reporting 6 good APUs.
Flight surgeon Catherine Langford monitors the crew vitals.
Jerry, this monitor's reading that you shouldn't have had the cauliflower at the pre-lunch dinner.
While mission specialist Jerry Pearson awaits all systems are go.
Well, when the ship launches, I will too.
Performing OMS tank repressurization.
They are aided by the Onboard Transport Information Network Artificial Intelligence Unit, known as TINA.
This is WTD conducting launch status check. As all stations verify ready to resume count and go for launch, crew is advised to stand by.
Copy that. Crew standing by.
So as that voiceover is going over what's going on, we get a look at the launch pad and the spaceship that they are on. And I want to just say that the design of the launch pad and that wide shot of everything around it is absolutely gorgeous. Like, I love the level of detail in it. I don't know if they did. I mean, I imagine that it's all CGI and everything, but if it is, like, I would say 90%, I'd be 90% sure that it's all CGI and everything. But on the off chance that they used miniatures in any way, it just looks really good. Like, I really like the level of detail to it. Like, it looks almost to the level of if they were to use miniatures for it, which miniatures just look gorgeous in their own right. Like, look at, Alien for a good example of using miniatures for spacecraft and everything. And also Blade Runner, of course. So the design of the spacecraft itself is modern to an extent, despite the high level of tech that's on board. And like the design of it really harkens back to the space shuttle program. And I love the design for that. I love that as a design. And there's a shot from the launch pad looking up at the spaceship that is just fantastic. Like right off the bat, this episode just looks gorgeous. And I feel like maybe I don't want to say like, oh, they used the budget for that design, because for the most part, the entire episode takes place in a confined space. But if that's the case, if they utilize the budget for those wide angle shots and those detailed shots of the exterior of the ship, kudos to them, because they really used it well. But we get a look at the space. When we get a look at the spaceship, it is shown that it's Whipple Aeronautics. And okay, I get that this is a running joke or Easter egg at this point. It's been like it's making certain things linked together within the episode, within the series, and that's fine, I guess. But 6 episodes in, and I'm really kind of tired of seeing Whipple everywhere. It was really cool seeing that Easter egg in Nightmare 30,000 Feet as the brand of the MP3 player. Like, that was a really cool nod to the original series. Granted, I haven't seen the Brain Center at Whipple's, so I don't know if the ubiquity of the brand throughout this entire season harkens back to that episode in a significant way or not. But as of right now, it's just way too much Whipple everywhere. Like, we've got the MP3 player in Nightmare 30,000 Feet. We've got Whipple News on the Wonderkind. We've got the pinball machine in the Wonderkind as well. I don't remember if there's anything in a Traveler. Nothing in the Comedian. But anyway, there's a lot of Whipple branding throughout this series, and it kind of makes me question, like, is Whipple, like, I don't know if Whipple is supposed to be like the Apple, like, I get the sense that, like, okay, Whipple is the Apple of this, like, universe, loosely connected universe of the Twilight Zone in this iteration of it. It's like the Apple, if Apple also partnered with, like, SpaceX now. It's like, it's way too much, and like Fox News or whatever. Like, it's too much. It's just too much. And like, it makes me wonder, like, are there other companies from the original series that they could use? Or hell, even just use character names as brand names. Like, introduce some kind of variety to it. Like, I mean, I was trying to brainstorm, like, different ways they could use character names, and the first one I could come up with is, like, okay, like, if they passed by, like, a bookstore and they could call it Bemis Bookstore, like, that would be a cool cute little Easter egg. But, and I'm so sorry for this, but you might say that by seeing so much of this branding throughout the series, you might say that it's giving me Whipple-lash. Like Whiplash. Okay, so the voiceover introductions aside, like in addition to, I'm so sorry for that. So in addition to introducing the cast and the crew of the mission, the voiceover also introduces the porthole that's over the flight deck, and it explains that it will be closed throughout the duration of their flight to Mars to protect the crew from radiation. And it's seeding the idea that it could be a simulation. Like, it's kind of, because they're not getting any actual, like, viewpoint of the outside. And I kind of like that in terms of a mystery thing, because it's like, it tracks pretty well. But it's also like, you kind of question it. And I kind of like that as a bit of mystery in the episode. So when we get a rundown of the crew as well, it ends with, introducing us to the AI unit that's aboard the ship, named Tina. And I assume that this has to be a reference to Talkie Tina in the original series. Living Doll, is it? I get that confused with, yeah, it's Living Doll, I think. Anyway, I had the same mistake, or the same issue a couple episodes ago. But I really like that Easter egg, because it's slightly more subtle than some of the other Easter eggs throughout the season. Like, there have been so many Easter eggs that are just in your face, and that's something that's kind of been getting to me. There's one later in this episode that I'll get to that just kind of, I'm just like, this would have been better if it wasn't just in the full frame of the scene. But I like the idea of having an AI unit aboard the ship as named Tina, and that's the only, like, it's not even, from my understanding, obviously, it's not like a a sound-alike to the Talkie Tina. It's just, hey, this AI is called Tina. It's a piece of machinery that can talk and interact with the crew. And I like that because that's all we need. Like that's all we need. Also, just the idea of the ship having an AI on it is just a complete, total staple of science fiction in terms of space odysseys and stuff. And I love that. Because I love that type of thing in science fiction. So at this point, they are T-minus 9 minutes from launch. And this is where I have to lodge like my first real complaint. Cause they're about to launch in 10 minutes. And I don't know, like there are surely countless constant pre-launch checks, and everything. And like mission control does say like, okay, well, we got to do this stuff. So stand by. So their reaction to that is to, mute ground control and start singing a song. Even though that comes into play later in the episode, like, I don't know. It just rubbed me the wrong way. It felt so cringy. Like also just like the singing, like them singing along is so goofy. It's like they're trying a little bit too hard to be like lighthearted in this scene. And also there's a contrast to that. Like it shouldn't be as lighthearted because like they've been training for this particular moment for 4 years and they're the first human, space mission to Mars. And it's like, I don't know, just something about it just didn't sit right with me. It just made me just like roll my eyes just a little bit. And I don't know, it kind of bothered me a little bit. It didn't break the episode or anything, but I was just like, I kind of cringed just a little bit. But their, little cockpit, or flight deck, I guess, concert gets interrupted by ground control because all hell starts breaking loose. And at this moment, like the concept of this episode is absolutely fantastic. It's a crew of 5 astronauts launching at the moment that nuclear war breaks out on the planet. And that obviously puts a massive damper on the mission itself and changes it entirely. And so at this moment, they have 10 minutes until contact, like the nukes hit. And that's 9 minutes, and there's 9 minutes until launch. So they have like a minute, of grace, like they have a minute window where they can escape and potentially escape from, the planet, obviously, or they can abort the mission and leave the ship. And I don't know. I feel like, first of all, 10 minutes is not nearly, long enough, long enough time to get them out of the ship and to safety. And that's something that I think it's Casey, the pilot, mentions. Like he says that we would be nuked by the time we get to like level 45 or whatever. So they vote on whether or not they should launch or abort. And Jerry hesitates after he sees the screen malfunction. And he says that he hesitated. He ends up voting that they go with the launch. But he says that he hesitated because he doesn't know how this could possibly be happening. And that's kind of like our first inclination, or it's seeding the plot later in the episode where he kind of has a mental break. So Brant, the commander, makes the decision to launch despite having a 4-1 vote. And Ray Tanaka is the one that has the dissenting vote of to abort. And so so they decide to launch. And I really like the way that the displays show just the audio wavelength when sound is coming from like the flight deck and everything. It just looks cool. I like seeing the audio wavelength on it, the display. And so they start to launch, and then that's when we transition to Peele's narration. But before I get to that, the camera work and lighting as the ship launches and the camera pulls back and spins to focus on Peele during the narration is really great. And like the flashing lights are a little bit seizure inducing, possibly, but just like the design of it is really cool. Like I really like that. Like I feel like that type of scenario, like having like a setting that's on a ship that is launching into space, I feel like that is a tricky thing to depict on film because it has the potential to look hokey. Like, it has the potential to look okay, the original Star Trek series has that kind of like goofy, like, oh, like everyone's shaking at the same time. And like, that's endearing and everything. And it's not as bad as like parodies of that would have you believe. But there's always that type of, threat when you're filming that kind of thing. And I feel like this episode does a good job of depicting the interior of the spaceship as it is traveling through space and off of the launch platform. So, here's where we get Peele's opening narration. I'm going to go ahead and play that audio here. So here is Peele's narration for 6 Degrees of Freedom.
5 voyagers, setting sail to a mysterious red light 35 million miles across an empty sea, soaring within the greatest invention ever created by the human spirit to escape a catastrophe made possible by the most destructive regions of the human mind. Individual madness or shared nightmare? The answer lies in their search for safe harbor, here in the Twilight Zone.
So recently in these bonus episodes, I've been kind of logging my complaints with Peele's narration. Just the writing of each narration has been kind of following a formula and everything. And this narration kind of follows a similar kind of formula. It's just introducing just the people in the crew and everything, but I love the narration in this episode. Like, this opening narration is very good. It's my favorite so far. I just think that it brings us into the atmosphere, no pun intended, of the episode and the plot really well. So so moving forward, the mission is called the Bradbury Heavy Mission to Mars. I feel like that has to be a Ray Bradbury reference, who he had one obviously a prolific science fiction writer and one of the like big names in science fiction writing, but he also did have one episode of the Twilight Zone called I Sing the Body Electric in, I believe it was season 5. But also one of the crew members, obviously, Jessica Williams' character's name is Ray. So I kind of wonder if that's kind of also paying tribute to Bradbury in its own way. So once they launch, they try to reestablish contact with Earth, but they just get an emergency broadcast message. And they also get, like, they intercept a Russian broadcast message as well, kind of saying the same thing. And at that moment, the pilot, Casey, asks Jerry if, who's the mission specialist, if they can open the porthole to see what's happening on Earth. And they can't do it if they're going to go ahead and go to Mars. Because at this moment, they're in orbit of Earth. So I can't remember the rationale, but basically, if they open it, they can only stay in orbit. But if they keep it closed and decide to move on to Mars, they will have to leave it closed. So at this point, they kind of have their next debate, I guess, of whether or not they should continue orbiting Earth for the rest of their days, or if they should go ahead and continue with the mission. So at this moment, Brant gives a speech that further establishes some backstory for all the characters, and I don't know. Okay, so she says, like, she mentions to Casey, she's like, we've wanted this mission since we were, and she says, in firsties with Red 11 Squadron. No idea what that is. It's an interesting piece of world building, if not a reference to something. I feel like that could be an Easter egg of some kind, but I didn't pick up on it at all. And then she mentions that Jerry beat like 15,000 applicants for his spot, and then he corrects her and says, like, well, actually it was 15,390. And so, like, those two examples are pretty, you know, interesting and everything. But then she gets to Katie, and I just had, so sorry, I had another whiplash, a little bit of whiplash. Anyway, because she's like, Katie lost her marriage for this mission. And it's just like, whoa, that's a hard left turn, Brant. Like, let's simmer down. And then, like, after that, she's just like, Ray's father died last month and we were all at the funeral. And it's like, okay, what are you trying to say? Like, I get that, like, I get what she's saying, that they're a family and everything, and they're close-knit and everything. But it's just like, that's such a weird gulf between the two, or between these examples, like the second example and the third example. It's just kind of weird. So anyway, they're faced with a choice. They can either orbit Earth until they run out of gas and die, or they continue the mission and go on to Mars. So Jerry brings up the theory of the Great Filter. And he says that the Great Filter theory is that life is extremely rare. Most life can't reach the stars, and that's why we haven't found life. And Mars is humanity's hope for breaking through the Great Filter. And I love that. I love that about this episode, because I'm vaguely familiar with this theory of the Great Filter and Fermi's paradox and like other kind of philosophical like theories and everything about, you know, alien life and everything. And it's just interesting to me, and I like that it's incorporated in this episode. And Brandt's speech, she gives a speech about continuing humanity through their mission, and I found that really inspiring. Like this whole sequence was really well done, in my opinion. So they decide to continue with the mission, and they have a moment where they're kind of breaking through the Earth's atmosphere and launching into their kind of course toward Mars. And this was pretty cool, like in terms of just the design and everything, and the dialogue and everything. So they kind of establish artificial gravity, and Jerry has the stylus pen that's going to come into play later. He's showing like, okay, it's floating, and then as soon as they kind of go into their whole thrust into their kind of course toward Mars, it, you know, falls back in his hand. And so after they are kind of going into their course toward Mars, this segment ends with Ray lamenting that everyone on Earth is dead, and then it closes with a video displaying that it's no longer functioning because there's no ground support or anything. And so this is our first kind of like break in the episode. There are several cuts to black where there's a display on it saying the duration to arrival, and at this point it's estimated 230 days to the destination. So these segments are kind of differentiating each segment. It's like the passage of time. So I kind of went through the trouble of compiling my notes in each of these different segments. So anyway, this time there are 230 days until destination. So we see brief glimpses before we get back to the ship of archival footage of past astronauts and space missions. And this is one moment where the episode kind of reminds me vaguely of the technique that Danny Boyle used in his movie Sunshine, which I'm, of course, a huge fan of, where he spliced frames of photos of the previous Icarus crew into the scenes in a particularly tense scene in the movie. And I'm not going to pick apart every single scene that feels like that it belongs in the movie Sunshine, but that seems like it also there. I'm not going to do that, but I'm going to go ahead and do that. So the previous where they're debating whether or not they should continue the mission feels just like Sunshine. And that's both a blessing and a curse, because I love Sunshine, but I can also kind of pick apart where this episode is a little bit derivative of that to an extent. Either, and that's it's hard to say, because that's either intentional, like this episode was intentionally paying homage to Danny Boyle's movie, or it's just that this episode was a who's who of space movie tropes and situations. Because as much as I love Sunshine, there's no denying that movie is a little bit derivative of past science fiction space movies and everything. So anyway, more on Sunshine as I go through this review, probably. So there are these silent images of the crew, and throughout this segment it's just kind of just showing like them all dealing with what's going on and dealing with the trauma that they've experienced. That, okay, Earth is dead. They are presumably, possibly the last of humanity, and they're going to Mars. So these shots include Jerry staring at an EVA suit, and there's a cool shot of his reflection in the visor. There's a shot of Brandt sleeping, Casey sitting contemplatively, Ray is biting her nails, and I don't think there's a shot of Katie in it, and I found that kind of odd. So that's a short thing. We get another duration to arrival. This time it's 211 days. And in this scene, the crew is attempting to call Earth to no avail. And Brant kind of takes charge, and she says she's going to prohibit calls to Earth because it's kind of pointless. And Katie questions that and says that I can't remember exactly what she says, but it's something to the effect of like, "Are you sure that you want to do this, or you're taking away their hope?" And then Brant's like, "I've made my decision, or I've said what I want to do." So the next duration to arrival is 201 days, and we come out of that black screen with more images of astronauts kind of spliced together. And this one had a lot of shots of different capsules and pods that have returned to Earth. And it looks like it's archival footage of the space program, which I kind of appreciated and thought was pretty cool. And in this segment, we see Brant exercising, and like this is a really cool like visual moment. There are close-up shots of the water in the rowing machine that's interspersed with Brant's mental image of her wife on Earth at the beach. And I thought that was a really interesting dynamic to present in this short segment. I really like the way that the camera is stationary as she rows back and forth. And as she goes back and forth, it's bringing her into and out of focus. And that's just a really cool visual component to this segment, showing her kind of unease with her mental state, I guess. Next duration to arrival is 189 days, and this time we see Jerry doing something to Tina, kind of hacking it or running tests to check if it's real or a simulation. And at this moment, when he's like, there are sparks and everything as he's kind of fiddling with the controls and everything, and we see an image of a life form kind of coming into the display. It's kind of like those toys, those kids' toys that has like the, I don't know what exactly they're called, but like they imprint and like whatever it comes through like on the other side. So like it's like these little like, I don't know how you would describe it, but like it's you push like your hand in it and you see a hand on the other side. That's the kind of visual component to this. So next duration to arrival is 188 days, and I like the display on the wall that's showing the orbits of Earth and Mars around the sun, because we come back from that and we see them all doing the obligatory / quintessential crew meal scene in the episode, which I'll get to that in a second. But like in the background, as Jerry is walking around, you see just the display on the wall showing the orbits of Earth and Mars, and there are marks for where the planets are at the time of launch and where they will be at the arrival. And I feel like that level of details is a nice touch to it. So as I said, this is the obligatory crew meal scene, and it highlights the like this device is supposed to highlight the camaraderie and closeness of the crew. And it is like I said, it's a quintessential scene in science fiction space movies and everything. Most notably, this is very much evoking memories of the movie Alien, although no one's chest bursts in the scene. And also to call back, again, Sunshine, and to highlight the other, like, kind of derivative nature of Sunshine. Sunshine, like, Danny Boyle is he's so cool. Like, if you listen to the commentary on Sunshine, he's just very, very laid back and everything, but he mentions, like, we're aping the meal scene from Alien because that's the best way to show the closeness of the crew and everything, and highlight their different personalities and everything. So this is paying homage to those two movies, I would say, or I would assume. So what they're saying in the scene is Jerry references War of the Worlds, but no one seems to really know it as a reference point, and it kind of made me wonder how far in the future this episode was meant to be. And then he immediately says, after I thought that, he says it was like 100 years ago. So arguably this takes place probably around 2030 and like the 2030s or 2040s. And Casey, this is an interesting little Easter egg. Casey says, "I really love that show Wild Cards." And at first I wondered if that was a reference to Hulu picking up a TV series based on George R.R. Martin's Wild Cards anthology stories. But from a light Google search and finding an article from vulture.com, it is apparently a reference to a Glenn Morgan show called Space Above and Beyond. It was co-created by Glenn Morgan. It was kind of a one-season wonder, so it didn't go past the first season. And I thought that was a really cool, like, homage, or reference point and everything. Yeah, so and I tried to look and see if Space Above and Beyond was available to stream anywhere, but I don't think it is. But yeah, it's a pretty cool little reference point. I'll put a link to that Vulture article in the show notes as well. So, Casey asks for Ray to pass the broccoli, and knowing what's to come with those two characters, I found that kind of confusing on repeat viewings, because I thought, is it like supposed to be flirtatious since it's about to be revealed that they are having sex? But no, like upon like further viewings, I kind of came to realize that it's probably just Ray being, upset over the fact that they went ahead with the mission and that they didn't abort like she wanted to, and she's like her vote didn't count toward whether or not they should leave or stay, and now everyone's dead and they'll never see she'll never see her family again. And I feel that's an interesting dynamic to present, because she's pretty down. So at that moment the lights flicker because Tina isn't getting the firmware updates from ground support that she should be, since everyone's dead, and everyone's kind of like I don't know, like Katie kind of tries to deflect with conversation about the tomatoes, and then like she's trying to keep it together, keep everyone sane, and I really appreciated that, as it kind of leads to her character arc throughout the episode, where she's kind of taking she's told that she's going to be the mom of the crew, but more on that later. So at this point, Jerry kind of soft pitches his theory, saying that the tomatoes will taste one way to someone but another to someone else, the same way that someone can like a song when he can just be like, no, that's garbage. And he's, at this point, it seems like he's trying to just introduce some philosophical debate to the proceedings, and Brant just shuts him down. She's like, are you going to do this the entire time? It reminded me of the John Mulaney bit where he talks about his dad being at, like, Lion King on Ice, and his dad hears a kid sitting in front of him saying, that's Simba, or whatever, and his dad just says, are you going to talk the entire time? Anyway, that gag reminded me of, Brant's shutting down Jerry reminded me of that. And I like Jerry's response to that. He's like, I didn't know that I wasn't allowed to, voice my opinion or whatever. It's just very it seemed like it bothered him, but he's like trying to, be, kind of, I don't know, funny about it, I guess. Or I guess passive aggressive would really be the way to describe that. So Brant ends up leaving the table, and it's like it's starting to get to her. So next duration to arrival is 155 days, and we see Brant trying to call home, and she gets her wife's voicemail. And like what I appreciate about this is that the kind of visual aspect of it is, as the phone is ringing, before she gets the voicemail, she's picturing the phone ringing. And it's somber and it's sad, and she ends up crying and everything. And I kind of wonder if that phone was a reference to something. Because it looked like an old-timey phone, like a old rotary phone. And even though I just watched Long Distance Call, I wonder if that's supposed to be a reference to the toy phone. Oh, that would be really cool. Huh. That might be. I'm going to make a unilateral decision. Yes, that was a reference to that. As the kids say, don't at me. I can't pull that off. So anyway, she hears a ruckus, and it ends up being Casey and Ray having sex. And I thought it was kind of funny. There's this Titanic moment where Ray puts her hand up against the fogged window, and I was like, okay, that's fine, whatever. I thought that was kind of funny. So when Brant is looking way too long, lingering at the through the window, Ray kind of smirks at her. And like she's very clearly kind of getting glee out of the fact that Brant is observing them. And I kind of wonder if that was just a reaction to like Ray not getting what she wanted in terms of aborting the mission and everything, and she's like, this is her kind of paying back, like kind of ruffling feathers in a way, I guess. I don't know. Maybe I'm kind of reaching here. I don't know if that's necessarily the intention, but that's kind of the vibe I got from it. So The next scene is Brant addressing them, saying, like, we can't afford any accidents, take on any additional crew, and we cannot risk any children. And Jerry ends up backing her up in this and explains that their food supply is designed to accommodate them and them alone. And yeah, so, and I thought it was funny that Casey was like, we've been really careful. And I'm like, have you though? Because, like, you were having sex. I assume that no one brought condoms. And I don't know. It feels like, it felt kind of weird. Anyway, Ray lashes out because she's upset because she's like, now you guys care about my life. Because Jerry had said, like, well, if she were to start breastfeeding, she would need more calories and everything, and that would be disastrous. And so she's upset and she kind of storms out. Next duration to arrival is 134 days, and we see Katie coming up to Brant, and Brant is laying in her bed holding her wedding ring. So, as previously established, Katie had divorced her husband before the launch. And Brant asks her point blank if she regrets divorcing her husband before the mission. And Katie says that she had a choice between her husband and a round-trip ticket to Mars, and she ended up getting none of that. And I like that as just a piece of dialogue. I think that's a cool way to demonstrate the toll that, like, their decision to go on with the mission is taking on their psyche, without overdoing it or really overdoing it. Yeah. So Katie then asks Brant about Brant's dream, and I felt like this is a little bit clunky because, like, it's not really established that Brant has been having nightmares or anything, not that I can remember. So, like, coming out of the gate with Katie just saying, like, hey, tell me about your dream, it felt a little out of nowhere. Also, and I know I said that I wasn't going to do this and nitpick, but this scene is pretty close to a scene in Sunshine. There's a scene where Kappa and I can't remember Rose Byrne's character's name. That's one of my favorite movies. Anyway, Kappa, played by Cillian Murphy, goes up to Rose Byrne's character, and they have a talk, like, when, like, kind of laying in bed, saying, like, I think she mentions that she's been having the same nightmare, or Kappa says that he's been having a nightmare or whatever. One of them has a nightmare, and I need to rewatch Sunshine. But anyway, they say that it's the same thing every time, falling into the surface of the sun. Because the whole point of Sunshine is they're flying to the sun to essentially restart it by launching a bomb into it, because it's fading, it's dying. So anyway, so this scene in 6 Degrees of Freedom felt very reminiscent of that scene. And Brant kind of tells her about the dream that she has, seeing her wife on the beach and kind of waiting for her on Earth. And Katie kind of reassures her and says that she's not alone, that the crew is a family, and Brant is the commander, so she's like their mom. And Brant's like, no, you're the mom. I'm nothing but the commander of a slow suicide. And the music in the scene is really beautiful. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and play this scene, a clip of this scene. So here you go.
This is the nightmare.
You're not alone. We're in this with you. You're our commander. We're a family and we need our mum.
You're the mom. I'm commander of nothing but a slow suicide.
And the similarities to similar scenes in Sunshine aside, I think that that's a really beautiful scene in the episode. So, next duration to arrival, like I said, there are a lot of cuts to the different durations of arrival shots, and I don't know, it got kind of cumbersome when I was making my notes, but in the moment when watching the episode, it wasn't a bother. So 115 days, and we see quick shots of astronauts again before we get back into the ship. And by the way, this is a good, I guess this would be a good part to bring it up. One of my, I'm not going to say that this is a complaint, because it's really not a complaint. It's just a little observation that I had. But as much as this episode is paying homage to space science fiction, Space Odyssey science fiction, the one thing that I kind of wish it did, like one element that it kind of neglected when paying homage to this type of science fiction is that the ship itself isn't named. Like we have Tina, the AI, but the actual, and it's, it's a Bradbury heavy mission to Mars. That's the name of the mission. And also like it's Whipple Aeronautics and everything. Like all that is naming like different things around it, but the actual vessel that they're in, the actual ship, does not have a name. And like Sunshine, it was Icarus. Star Trek has the Enterprise. Star Wars has Millennium Falcon, and also like Alien has the Nostromo. And I had a whole bunch of other ones, but I'm spacing the rest. But no pun intended. So. Yeah, I kind of wish I wish that there was something there. Like they could have, like that could have been a good way to kind of incorporate another original series Easter egg, but whatever. It doesn't hamper the episode or anything. I just thought that like for an episode that is, so much paying homage to a specific type of science fiction, it kind of neglected this kind of staple of science fiction. Oh, another example was the Normandy in the Mass Effect video game series. So, anyway, I should really play Mass Effect Andromeda. Anyway, because the ship in Andromeda has a different name, because it's obviously a different ship. I can't remember the name of it though. So, anyway, back to this episode. Ray is trying to communicate with Earth to no avail. This is, again, it's 115 days to Mars, and Ray's trying to call Earth, and Casey tries to convince her to stop, and he asks, what if someone answers, then what? And then he says, I'd just rather have faith that they're not all gone. And I think the implication of that is rather than confirm it or kind of keep trying to make contact and have that be just chipping away at that faith of it. And this was a moment that I thought was really cool. I really appreciated this moment because that's when a transmission actually comes through. And you can argue that also these little breaks here, like the timing of them are very convenient because it's like right after a character says something. But like you can argue that we'll get to that. We'll get to it at the end. But are the aliens manipulating things on the ship as they're observing the mission, or is it completely impartial? And I'll talk about that later. But anyway, the clip there, or the transmission that comes through, is actually a clip from the Munsters. And they mentioned that, like, we've been broadcasting into space for a long time, and we just ended up picking up one of our own signals from long ago. So, I thought that was really interesting. And one of the more, kind of blink and you'll miss it lines is Katie's response to that. She says, so the only evidence there's advanced life on Earth is fake. And I feel like that, like I said, it's a blink and you'll miss it line, but it carries a lot of philosophical weight, and it's something that is really, something that really is food for thought. It kind of makes you think a little bit. Like the transmissions we bounce into space through television and radio waves and everything, for the most part, is scripted stuff. Like it's dramatizations and everything. And it's interesting because, like, to think about it, it's not an authentic representation of what life on Earth is like, but it's an interesting way to kind of talk about that as the only evidence there's advanced life on Earth is fake. So I appreciated that line, and I thought it was interesting. So Katie brings this makeshift instrument to Ray, switching to another scene, and it's shown that they're putting something together, and Katie is trying to reassure Ray that they're all in this together. She says, once you've exhausted your anger, you'll end up like Alexa, meaning very kind of withdrawn, emotionally and everything. And it's an interesting thing, especially since they're doing this, they're trying to make a makeshift instrument for, Alexa. So then we get another scene where Jerry is looking through his notes and data, and in this moment there are more shots of archival astronauts kind of interspersed with those, like him going through his little like notepad. I thought that was interesting because we don't, like, this is one of the only times where we get the archival astronaut shots without like having a break in the the duration to arrival scenes. I thought that was kind of interesting, worth commenting on, I guess. So Jerry goes into the bathroom, and I want to highlight here, the camera work in this scene is really fantastic, because we're seeing everything from, we're seeing Jerry from his reflection. We're seeing his reflection through the viewpoint of his eyes. And I don't know, just the way that the camera follows his head movements when he's like washing his hands and washing his face and drying his face. I just like the way the camera kind of moves around with that. And at this point, we see Jerry collecting his data, and he's using his bare hands to scrape liquid from the bottom of what I assumed was the toilet. In that moment, on my first viewing, I really thought that he was testing to see if Ray was pregnant. That wasn't the case, though, and thank God, because that was kind of gross, if that was the case. So, and we'll get to what he was doing here in a second, but we get another duration to arrival interruption. Duration to arrival is 76 days, so we're getting closer. And we cut to the crew singing Happy Birthday to Brant and giving her a little cupcake and everything with fake candles on it. And and then I don't know. So they give their present to Brant, which is a song, and the song is California Dreamin' by the Mamas and the Papas. And they start singing, and like at that moment I'm like, what is up with this crew and singing? Because they sang that family song at the beginning, and now they sang Happy Birthday, of course, and then now they're singing Mamas and the Papas song. It's just I don't know. It's just like it's weird. I don't know. So as they're singing, Katie starts to break down and cry, and she says that she doesn't want to be the mom of the crew. She can't, it's like she can't handle the pressure. And that's when Jerry decides to drop the bomb that he's been sitting on, metaphorically. He thinks they're in a simulation and not really in space. And he says that he's been collecting data from the start, and he has evidence that will prove beyond a reasonable doubt that they are in a simulation rather than being actually in space going to Mars. And this ends up being kind of a coping mechanism in his mental state breaking down, but it actually tracks well. Like it tracks well as a possible simulation, because everything, like, they don't see Earth through like a window or anything because of that porthole cover being covered for radiation, and it's like it's all kind of based on faith that they are going to Mars. And it's just, that's when he mentions here in a second that he believes that they're in a 6 degrees of freedom simulation, and the 6 degrees of freedom is a simulation that moves like that has 6 different degrees of movement to I don't know how exactly to phrase it. 6 degrees of movement that will give you the simulation of being like in space, I suppose. So right then there's a solar flare that sets off an alarm. And again, another reference, another, not nitpick or anything, but it seems like it's an homage to something that happens in Sunshine, but that's neither here nor there. So, it's really interesting timing, because it leads you to think that they really are in a simulation and that the alarm is to deflect their attention. Not only that, it seems like it's possible that maybe the aliens are manipulating things to keep them away from figuring out that they are, being observed at least. And at this moment, this is where everything goes into complete chaos. And I feel like the build-up toward this moment, it's paying it like there's a decent amount of build up, because like everything up until this point has been pretty much all character based and reaction based to what's going on with their mission and everything. And I feel like the payoff of this is pretty well earned, because while it hasn't been necessarily a big tension building episode, just having this reaction from a character, kind of almost psychotic kind of break or mental break, is satisfying, because we've been building up the characterization of each character as the episode has been progressing. And at this moment, though, I do have to mention that there was a weird act break. Another podcast who's been reviewing the new episodes, I can't remember which podcast it was. It may have been Tom Elliott on the Twilight Zone podcast, or maybe Craig Beam on Between Light and Shadow. Actually, I don't think it was his, because he hasn't, I don't know. Anyway, one podcast that has been talking about it mentions the act breaks throughout the episodes, and it's weird that since it's on a streaming platform, and I haven't really noticed them except for here. Like, this is a weird break because I'm watching it without ads. Like, I have the CBS All-Access subscription that has no ads, so I assume that this is where like an ad would come in if I did have that. But I do want to highlight that, like, when we get back from that weird act break, like that black screen and coming back into it, Jerry is really reiterating his hypothesis that they're in a simulation. I'm going to go ahead and play a clip here of that as it switches from the cut to black and then back into the scene. So here's a clip of what I'm talking about.
I got news for you. None of this is real.
It's just a test. None of this is real. None of it. It's just a test. My hypothesis is such that the events on this ship are the result of an endurance simulation experiment.
So when we get back from that, obviously, like I said, Jerry is reiterating his hypothesis that they're in a simulation. And at first, it kind of sounds weird, like they're coming back from a network TV commercial break and he has to catch viewers up. But it's streaming, so like we don't have that. So I don't know if I think that other podcast. I'm so sorry, I can't remember what exact podcast it was, but they said that maybe they're going to repurpose the series and have it run in syndication on CBS at some point, which would be kind of tricky with the profanity and everything, but I don't know. Now that I'm saying it out loud, I think that may have been the Twilight Zone podcast by Tom Elliott. So anyway, at this point, Jerry is completely off the deep end, as he gradually gets more and more hysterical as he presents his theory. The alarm and Tina's instructions and the panic of the other crew members as they're trying to work through this problem of the solar flare, all that escalates as Jerry gradually gets more and more hysterical. And what I appreciate about this is that Katie in the scene is trying to appease him and speak to him with empathy, saying like, okay, I understand, like you're putting everyone in danger though. I believe you, she's trying to get him to get to his seat on the flight deck. But he won't listen. He just keeps spouting his theory. And at this moment, that's where he talks about, the idea that they're in a 6 degrees of freedom simulation. And from what I gather in the panic, it's kind of hard to discern exactly what he's saying as far as his tests and everything. But what I gathered is that what I think is the case is that the test he was running in the bathroom was to see if there was any condensation or crystallization in the bathroom, because if I'm understanding it correctly, the toilet ejects their waste into space, and contact with the vacuum of space should create some kind of condensation or crystallization in the inside of the toilet thing. That's my understanding, at least. I don't know if that's what they were going for, but that's my understanding of the scene. So if you have another interpretation or a more correct interpretation, let me know, because I was kind of a little bit confused. Because, like, for all that this episode does well for me, for my taste, like I said, my very specific science fiction sensibilities, this scene is very hectic and very just crazy. Like, I really like Jefferson White's performance in the scene as Jerry is breaking down his theory while also breaking his mental kind of integrity. It's a really good performance by Jefferson White, but it's so chaotic that it's hard to tell. It's kind of overwhelming. Like, the amount of information that he's giving that could be important, but I couldn't tell what the hell he was saying most of the time. But anyway, so as he gets deeper into his rant, he starts to break down emotionally, and the cracks in the confidence of his coping mechanism he has, it's starting to show, and he starts to break down a little bit, and he gets very just, angry, I guess. He said, he yells, and this is one of the moments where I loved it. He yells that they've been watching us the whole time, and he said, he yells that they made us think that our family are dead. And it's just he's so the energy is just so big and crazy. And it's interesting because he was seeing the aliens observing them coming through the display and everything. So like he's half right. But I love the way that Jefferson White commits in the scene. I just really liked it. So it culminates with Jerry going into the airlock to prove that it's a simulation, and he effectively commits suicide. And we cut to what I thought was a really cool visual callback to the quintessential dining scene, meal scene of the crew, because we see like the table that they were at and they were eating at kind of just vacant of everyone because everyone's on the flight deck and Jerry has left the building, has left the ship, and we get California Dreamin' playing as everything on the table is like floating in 0G. Then we get a cut to duration to arrival, 67 days. And when we get back to the crew, everyone's mourning the loss of Jerry. And I thought that it was I did want to highlight kind of an interesting piece of set design here, that when Katie goes into the bathroom, the sign before she enters it displays this unisex figure with vacant written underneath it. And when Katie goes into it, it switches to occupied, and the figure becomes the figure of a woman, like the kind of quintessential, like, woman display figure of like bathroom occupancy, which is I don't know. I feel like there's a joke, like that's my album name or whatever. But name of your sex tape, I guess, for Brooklyn Nine-Nine fans. Anyway, I just thought that was kind of a nice touch to the set design to make it look more futuristic. And it's just such a quick thing, and it just goes a long way to show that they are in the future in this high-tech spaceship and everything. I appreciated that as in terms of set design and everything. So we see that Katie is running the same test that Jerry was running. And I don't know, I feel like if they had more time, it would have been interesting to have Katie like take up this paranoid mantle that Jerry had, and it kind of just making it seem like it was I don't know, kind of like his sacrifice was like them actually like figuring it out, which we get kind of some of that there, but I would have liked it, like if this was a feature length movie, which I mean it's 54 minutes, so it's damn near feature length anyway, but if this was a feature length movie, Katie taking up the mantle of Jerry as a paranoid person, like running tests and everything, I think that would have been an interesting character development for the crew and everything. But since it's just an hour-long episode of a television show, we don't have that time. So it's shown that Katie is running the same test that Jerry was running, and Brant asks like what she found. And I thought this was really interesting because Katie found that there is crystallization, and I found that really interesting because I don't know what, like, I read it one of two ways. So it's either that if it was true, like, okay, Jerry really did have a psychotic break and he just couldn't cope with the truth of what was going on, or couldn't cope with the drama of losing everyone on Earth and not being able to, like, just, he couldn't handle it. So his mind kind of led him toward this paranoid kind of thing. So like even if there was crystallization, like he couldn't see it. Like I kind of like that as a way. I don't know. I kind of like that interpretation of it. But I also, on the other hand, have another interpretation where are we meant to believe, like, now that we're, you know, if you take into context the entire episode, do the aliens at the end have more control over the mission rather than just observing? So is it possible that Jerry got the jump on them, and after he called them out for it, they manipulated the ship to include the crystallization, so that no one else would be the wiser? I just think that that's an interesting kind of fork in the road of this narrative, that you could have two completely different interpretations of this scene where Katie finds the crystallization that Jerry was so sure wasn't there, that led to him dying. I think that would have been, it's interesting to have those two forking interpretations. But regardless, to the crew, this revelation tells them that Jerry was wrong, and the implication is that he went crazy. And so we get the crew having the spiritual, metaphysical conversation about Jerry and what it means when someone is truly gone. And I don't know, they're kind of like they're in their like bunk beds and stuff. And I like Jessica Williams acting in this moment. Like, she's talking about how she's so sure that, like, when her dad died, she knew that she still felt his presence and everything. And she, as a scientist, she knows that there's scientific reasons for that feeling, but she can't reconcile her scientific mind with the fact that, like, she has this profound feeling about it. Like, I really, like, that's one of my favorite things about science fiction, is this moment where people can talk about, like, the spiritual side, like the science versus the rational thought or logic or anything. That's one of my absolute favorite things about Sunshine, is that dynamic in that movie. Because that movie has, like, very clear, like, science versus religion, or logic versus faith. It's really good. Also, kind of shout out to Lost. Like, that plays with a lot with the dichotomy between Jack and Locke and Lost. So I love that in science fiction, and I like Jessica Williams acting, but I feel like the episode doesn't quite build up to this scene that properly. I kind of feel like well, I guess it does, because we did have the meal scene where they kind of brought that up, but I don't know. I just feel like there should have been more kind of philosophical or spiritual, metaphysical conversations throughout the episode to kind of earn that. Also, it ends with a joke from Casey, knocking on the ceiling and making light of their friend's death, and I felt like that was kind of clunky. I felt like that was just kind of, I don't know. It felt like the episode was trying to make it a lighter scene, when I feel like the drama of it could have necessitated it staying as dramatic as it was. But I don't know. That felt just kind of clunky. But Katie brings it back to serious, and she talks about how Jerry lost his home, and that they are each other's home now. And I really like that. And she says, we may not have a home, but we have each other. We're a family. And then I think Casey says, and Tina, family. And then that plays that annoying ass song from the beginning of it to lighten the scene a bit. Like that, I like that. Also in this scene, we see that Katie has a toy Northern Gold Star plane. And I thought that was a nice touch. I just wish the camera didn't focus on it and let it fill the entire frame. I would have liked more subtlety, as I hinted at before. But I liked it. I thought it was a nice touch. Also, I don't like, okay, before we get to, we're almost at the end of this episode. I didn't really catch a lot of Easter eggs or anything for, like, early episodes or original series episodes. So that's why I think that phone image may have been a reference to Long Distance Call. Also, I have a leak in my apartment, so if the mic is picking any of that up, it's, that's what it is. But anyway, okay, so we get the last cut to duration scene, and it just says Arrival, which, by the way, Arrival is a great movie, apropos of nothing. So here we go. They finally arrive at Mars, and it's the moment of truth. Is it real or a simulation? And I did want to mention, it looks like Katie has, like, hives on her neck in that, and I'm not sure what that's about, or, like, it's not paid off or called back or anything. Maybe maybe it wasn't supposed to be anything. Maybe that's just the actress's complexion or whatever, but I don't know. I noticed it. So everything on the displays is digitized, and it looks like a video game on the displays. And I felt like that makes the tension of whether or not they are actually at Mars or in a simulation a little bit more palpable, and I really like that. So we get the big reveal. They open the porthole and find that, yes, they are on Mars. And I think that there's a potentially more satisfying ending here. But I wonder if there is a way that they could have ended it in a more ambiguous way, like regarding where they were. Like, maybe when the camera pulled out, I don't know, maybe a soundstage, but then again, that wouldn't be ambiguous. That would answer one way or the other. But anyway, the camera pulls out, and we see just that it is Mars. And I don't know, Brant's last line is, Jerry died for nothing. And I'm like, Jesus, Brant, like, show some compassion or something. Like, that's kind of just, damn. But the last scene, as we fade out from the shot of the ship on Mars, is we go through, for lack of a better word, we go through like a filter, and we see we're into like an alien room, and it has a bunch of different displays that echo, like, that were the displays of the opening moment of the episode, showing the mission. And we see Jerry laying on kind of a watery floor, that also probably has a leaky, air conditioner, like my apartment now. Anyway, voiceover in the room states that enough data has been collected. And like I said before, that voiceover has a, in the closed captions says, that that voiceover belongs to a public affairs officer. So I don't know what that is all about or what we're to infer from that. And why it's English also, because we get alien dialogue and we get a back and forth, presumably between two aliens, saying that, they have exceeded our expectations and passed through the great filter. Most life never does, but it took the near destruction of their planet for them to finally do so. Then says, their relationships remained strong, but they remained curious. This one discovered we were watching. Impressive. Indeed impressive. They are worthy of salvation. Prepare to make contact. And it ends with Jerry staring and smiling, staring into like the displays showing, Mars, and it zooms in on his eye, and then that's it. We get, Peele's closing narration, which I will play right now.
It is said that seeing is believing. The crew of the Bradbury Heavy mission to Mars might tell you otherwise. They are about to find out that they couldn't trust their own eyes. But who or what can we trust if not ourselves? The answer lies somewhere between takeoff and landing in the Twilight Zone.
So, that is 6 Degrees of Freedom. I think overall, this episode owes quite a bit to movies like Sunshine and Alien, like I said before. Maybe also Event Horizon. It's been a while since I've seen that movie, but it does tell a unique enough story that is compelling in its own right and steeped in this trauma of leaving the Earth behind amidst just multiple nuclear wars. And I love that. I love this episode for that reason. I have, like I've been doing with these other reviews and everything since I've fallen a little bit behind with the release schedule of the new Twilight Zone. I haven't read or listened to any feedback, or any podcasts or anything. I haven't seen any reactions online, but I'd be very curious to learn like what the reaction to this episode was, because I really loved this episode. I thought it was very, very strong, but also I couldn't really detect that much of like a political commentary or anything in the episode. So like the people who have been kind of complaining about the show being about like, social justice warriors and stuff, and just kind of having a bug up their ass about that aspect of it, I kind of wonder how those viewers in particular feel about this episode, because I couldn't really pick up anything except for nukes are bad. Like the podcast Between Science and Superstition, I saw that their title for this review was "Nukes Are Scary," and I really appreciate that. I can't wait to hear what they think of this episode, but of the Twilight Zone. But yeah, I'm very curious what the reaction is to this episode. But me and my own little vacuum here, that could be a simulation, I don't know. But my reaction is that I really, really found this episode compelling, interesting, and it is right in my wheelhouse of science fiction fandoms and everything. So I think that it did that sub-genre of science fiction, the whole spacefaring adventure kind of humanity moral quandaries and stuff. I think it did that justice. I think it did that specific type of science fiction justice, and I really enjoyed this episode. So let me know what you guys thought of 6 Degrees of Freedom. Of course, like I said, you can email me at matt@obsessiveviewer.com, reach out to me on the Facebook page at facebook.com/anthologypod, or simply tweet me at OVAnthologypod. And also, thank you once again to my emailer who emailed in, my listener who emailed in, that I'm keeping anonymous. And then also thank you once again to Robert for the very, very kind iTunes review. And I hope you guys like the show. If you do, check out, go ahead and leave a review on iTunes. Also, there's another website called podchaser.com. You can leave a rating and review there. I have all of the Obsessive Viewer shows on that website as well. And it doesn't, like, you can just go in your browser, sign up, and leave a review that way. It's not, doesn't require like a specific like iTunes account or anything like that. So, having said all that, thank you guys so much for listening. Once again, I'll go ahead and say, check out my other podcasts, Obsessive Viewer. We are finishing, or have just finished, our review series on the last season of Game of Thrones. We also have a bunch of movie reviews on there. We're up to episode 283. We have a Detective Pikachu review coming out next week, so check that out at obsessiveviewer.com. Also, check out Tower Junkies, which is my spinoff podcast about Stephen King and the Dark Tower series, and just all things Stephen King, with my friend Tiny, who's been on this podcast before. Check that out at towerjunkiespod.com. New episodes of that podcast are going to be coming out soon. And yeah, next time on the main feed of this podcast, I'm going to be reviewing Long Distance Call, and also check out my just recently released review of The Prime Mover, which I loved. And and then next on the bonus episode feed, it's the same feed, but the next bonus episode is going to be my review of, I think it's Not All Men. So I'm very excited about that because I haven't watched the episode yet. So I'm going to go ahead and watch that now and then edit this episode and release it. So thank you guys so much for listening, and I'll see you next time.
Anthology is edited and produced by Matt Hurt and presented by ObsessiveViewer.com. For a full archive of our episodes, go to anthologypod.com/archive. You can also like the Facebook page at facebook.com/anthologypod and follow the show on Twitter at OVAnthologypod. If you enjoy the show, please take a couple minutes to leave us a rating and a quick review on Apple Podcasts. This is the easiest way to support what we do, and all it costs is a little bit of your time. If you'd like to donate to the podcast, you can make a PayPal donation at anthologypod.com/donate, or support us on Patreon for recurring donations and access to commentary tracks and B-roll audio recorded exclusively for patrons at patreon.com/obsessiveviewer. Every donation goes toward paying the fees to keep the podcast running and is greatly appreciated. Official Anthology merch, including shirts, mugs, phone cases, and more, can be found in the Obsessive Viewer's TeePublic store. You can find a link to the store in the show notes of this episode and at anthologypod.com/donate. Or you can simply search for Obsessive Viewer at tpublic.com. For information about the Obsessive Viewer's annual live event showcasing short horror films from local filmmakers, check out shocktoberinirvington.com. And for an archive of all our events, as well as news about potential future events, head over to obsessiveviewer.com/live. For more podcast content, you can find our flagship movie and TV review and discussion show, The Obsessive Viewer Podcast, at obsessiveviewer.com, and on Twitter at obsessiveviewer. You can also find Tower Junkies, a podcast where Matt and co-host Tiny share their love of all things Stephen King and his magnum opus, the Dark Tower series, over at towerjunkiespod.com and at towerjunkiespod on Twitter. And finally, check out The Secular Perspective, Tiny's side project podcast, which tackles current events and life's big questions from the perspective of secular hosts Chad and Amanda at thesecularperspective.com. Bumper music for this podcast comes courtesy of As Good As It Gets, which can be found at facebook.com/asgoodasitgetsband. You can also find As Good As It Gets music on Spotify, Google Play, and iTunes. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Kitty!